Western colonization is a political economic phenomenon where many European nations explored, conquered, settled, and exploited large areas of the world. European powers attempted to control the rest of the world and all of its wealth between the 16th and the 20th centuries. They were successful in gaining control of large portions of America, Africa, Australia, and Asia. But still, there were some countries which were able to completely avoid colonization. Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back to another episode here on FTD Facts. I'm your host Leroy Kenton, and for this one we're going to be looking at 10 countries that were never colonized. So let's jump in. The country at number 10 is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was initially ruled by tribal leaders. The Ottoman Empire seized control of the majority of Saudi Arabia in the 16th century and ruled it until 1918. Now, the Saudi royal family began fighting for control of the country during this empire. Now, this political movement took place during World War I when Britain was fighting against the Ottoman Empire. Britain supported Pan-Arab revolt in order to weaken the empire, and at the end of World War I, the empire lost control of the country, leaving behind a united Arab state. From there, let's move on to Iran. Previously known as Persian Empire and now called Iran, it's a country in which both British and Russian forces were very interested to get control over. Russia was even successful in capturing some of the northern areas of the empire, for example, Turkmenistan during the 19th century. On the other hand, the British forces were able to get control of the eastern region of the Persian Empire, which includes areas near Pakistan. Now, the vast majority of Iran was ruled at the time by the Qajar dynasty, which had borrowed money from European banks. Unable to repay them, the British and Russian governments agreed to control and share Persian revenues from various sources. Now, while the Persian Empire never agreed to this condition, it did prevent the country from being colonized officially. From there, let's look at the country of Japan. This country was able to prevent Western colonization, and its government was also able to establish a strong influential presence in Taiwan, Korea, and South Sakhalin. The government initiated the Meiji Restoration in 1868 when it was receiving heavy threats of Western invasion. This social and political reform prepared the country to defeat China during the First Sino-Japanese War. When Russia attempted to invade again later, Japanese forces were prepared and won the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. Now, during World War II, the country used its advantage to annex Korea and Manchuria, establishing itself as a colonial power as well. From there, let's take a look at Korea. Instead of being ruled by Europeans, Korea was ruled by Asian powers. Until the year 1895, it was a tributary state. Until 1895, it was a tributary state of Qing China when it was taken over by the Japanese government after the First Sino-Japanese War. In 1910, it became a formal Japanese colony, avoiding European colonization. The next country is Thailand. In the 19th century, the country was known as the Kingdom of Siam, and the kingdom was situated between French-ruled Indochina and British-ruled Burma. In order to avoid colonization, the King of Siam worked to adopt several European civilizations, and he from there became very interested in European technology. His diplomatic efforts aided him in influencing the British-French relationship in his favor, preventing European rule over the majority of his kingdom. The country next who avoided Western colonization is China. The Chinese Empire was an extremely large force when Europeans were attempting to gain some control over it. The Chinese Empire is often compared to the Ottoman Empire. Its large size really worked in its favor, and it made it very difficult for it to be targeted by colonizers. Rather than gaining colonial rule, Britain and France were able to gain some power over China through imports and exports. During the First and Second Opium Wars from 1839 to 1842 and 1856 to 1860, their status as favored nations grew. The United States, Russia, and Italy all wanted to be favored nations after seeing the benefits. Rather than being colonized, Western powers divided China's coastal areas, causing the Qing dynasty to lose some but not all of its control. Afghanistan is also another country who avoided Western colonization. Like the Persian Empire, this country was also a hot favorite of both Great Britain and Russian forces. They both attempted and tried to get it under control, but the Afghan military was aware of this intention, so they conquered the British Army in the First Anglo-Afghan War in 1839. British forces, not to be discouraged though, attempted to retake control of Afghanistan in the Second Anglo-Afghan War, which lasted from 1878 to 1880. During this war, the British were able to negotiate control of the country's foreign relations while maintaining domestic control in Afghanistan. From there, let's talk about Nepal. The Nepali military forces fought in the Anglo-Nepalese War from 1814 to 1816. The British East India Company, on the other hand, had larger troops and was able to get approximately 30% of Nepal's territory under control. In this case, the geographic features of Nepal worked in its favor, and the mountains of the country really deterred British passage. To avoid the difficult terrain, British forces left the rest of Nepal as an independent state, establishing a border zone with British India. Furthermore, the British Army was very impressed with the military prowess of the Gurkha troops of Nepal and recruited them for the colonial army. Next up on the list, the country of Bhutan. Like Nepal, Bhutan is also located in the Himalayan mountain range, and being located there makes it very difficult to be invaded because of the terrain. Now, the British military fought from 1772 to 1774 and conquered some minor areas of the Kingdom of Bhutan. However, the control gave them bargaining power. The Kingdom of Bhutan agreed to pay them 5 horses and give them control of its logging industry in exchange for the removal of British troops. Now, despite this agreement, both countries were in constant border disagreement up until 1947, when India and Pakistan were separated and the British forces withdrew from the Indian subcontinent. The final country in this episode that avoided Western colonization is Ethiopia. From 1880 to 1914, the country was able to avoid colonization. Now, during this time period, powers competed to invade and colonize the African continent. But the end of the invasion period, well, European nations had colonized roughly 90% of Africa. And in 1867, King Tewodros wrote to Queen Victoria of England, who did not even respond. In 1868, King Tewodros, he was enraged and imprisoned several British subjects and refused to release them. The British forces invaded in unsuccessful attempts to dispose of the king, and in 1888, Italian forces arrived but only took over Eritrea after negotiating with Ethiopia. Now, in the First Italo-Ethiopian War of 1896, Ethiopia defeated the Italian army. And in 1935, the Italian forces led by Mussolini invaded and occupied Ethiopia, disposing of Emperor Haile Selassie. And at the end of World War II, back in 1914, Emperor Haile Selassie actually was able to regain and annex the Italian colony in Eritrea in 1943. But Ethiopia was never ever 100% under control of any Western force. So there you have it, guys. That's all I have for this video. This was a look at 10 countries that have never been colonized, specifically Western colonization. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up. Also, I'm curious to know what your comments are about anything presented in this episode. Sound off down below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.